officially, thank you guys all for showing up, and we're looking forward to sharing the information with you. Every year we try and do a summer lunch and learn series that's applicable to our client base. And every time, summer comes around throughout the year, we find certain things that are becoming issues with our client base. And this just happens to be one because of COVID, because of people moving all over the place. What we really wanted to address is the digital nomad, because it's definitely something that has become a more popular way to do business. And we wanted to address this from an insurance perspective, like how to protect you if you're an employer, how to protect your client or your employees, if you're a business manager, how to protect your clients, all of that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Shiloh. Shiloh is our individual specialist, and she knows everything there is to know about individual coverage, and she runs into this all day long. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shiloh. And again, thank you. And if anybody has any questions during the meeting, you can unmute yourself, ask questions in the chat room, anything you might like. So again, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shiloh. Like Heather said, I am the individual specialist here at IBC. I do pretty much everything from individual health insurance to Medicare, as well as travel policies. So anything that's more individual based, that's kind of my forte. As Heather mentioned, the digital nomad fad, and I hate to call it a fad because it's really not that anymore, but it has become really more top of mind for a lot of our clients and a lot of our individuals. Obviously, during the pandemic, a lot of things changed. So we really wanted to talk about what a digital nomad is, how that has changed the workforce recently, how those digital nomads have to navigate health insurance, because there are different options and requirements for those people with that type of lifestyle, how to maximize benefit options, what's important to keep in mind when you're picking a plan and you do have this type of location independent lifestyle, and what changes are coming. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of solid changes coming, but just the way that the marketplace has been changing, we know that we're going to see some stuff coming in the future. So we want to prepare everybody for that when the time comes. To start it out, what is a digital nomad? Back in the day, a digital nomad was, a footloose and fancy free hippie living on a beach. It's not really that anymore. Nowadays, digital freelancers can be anything from, a content creator, personal assisting, tutoring, anything that allows somebody to be location independent and technology enabled. Really what that means is remote workers, self-employed individuals, freelancers, anybody who is essentially working remote. That can mean domestically or overseas. So you do get those clients that are working on a beach, but more often than not, it is more of a remote worker, someone who is traveling for the need to travel for their job. So here's a little peek at the numbers, which this was really mind-blowing to me when I started doing some of this research. I was a freelancer myself for quite some time throughout college, and I always felt that I was one in a handful. And so now to look at these numbers, it's a little bit crazy. As you can see, it went up from 2019 and 2021, almost 10 million freelance or digital nomad jobs were created. And just looking at the graph of the age range, a lot of the baby boomers are aging out, and more millennials, Gen Z and Gen X are entering the workforce, which is kind of skewing the numbers when it comes to traditional workers, meaning corporate workers that go to an office every day, versus digital nomads, or those that do remote work. And more often, as I said before, these digital nomads are holding degrees, and they work in specialty education or training. They have a very precise expertise to them. So they're a needed part of the industry. It's no longer just someone who's just answering emails for you. It could be somebody who's a very integral part of your business who happens to not come to the office every day. These are the top destinations in both the United States and international. This includes not only a large amount of freelance workers that are already living there, but also has a very high desire for freelance workers. A lot of this has to do with obviously cost of living, job expectations, or I'm sorry, job availability, as well as just generic like life of, living there and joy of living there. Austin, Texas is one of the biggest ones here in the United States, followed by Colorado, Boulder specifically. Los Angeles is on there. Obviously, we have a lot of freelancers here when we have the entertainment industry, although that is kind of waning, as we all know, with the strikes going on. Lake Tahoe, Atlanta, Georgia, which is becoming another huge hub for the entertainment industry, and Bozeman, Montana, which I thought was very interesting, but apparently they have quite a low cost of living, which is a desirable factor for someone who doesn't have to necessarily live where they are working. Internationally, Canada has been quite popular with the United States, United Kingdom, of course. Thailand is very popular, Denmark, France, and Australia. All of these international places offer even some type of incentive for those who are looking to move there and digitally work. I know Thailand offered quite a bit of that during the pandemic, so I think that's what kind of moved a lot of people to that area. So this is kind of what can get a little bit hectic for people that are doing digital working or working away from where they work or where they are spending time. A lot of people don't understand that individual health plans are tied to the state that they are written in. So for example, if you are a freelancer here in California, you are only covered in your home state. You are not covered. There are very specific rules and regulations when traveling outside of the home state, and that does include even from California to, let's say, Colorado, for example. So on the individual market, you only have up to 50% of coverage, and that is for emergency care only. That means if you were to fall and have an emergency need, then you will only get coverage up to 50%. In a lot of those cases, you will have to pay 100% out of pocket and then submit a claim for later reimbursement. Not a lot of people understand this, especially because you assume I'm in the United States, I'm covered. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And this can be a huge issue for someone who, say, is working in Los Angeles, but technically is living in Bozeman, Montana. Their coverage in California might not cover them in Montana, and vice versa. And that can lead to a lot of confusion, a lot of issues when trying to understand how to properly set up your health insurance when you live this type of lifestyle. Another big thing we've been seeing a lot of, especially after the pandemic, was people living or splitting their residency between two states. Now, this is something we don't normally see in like lower income or even mid-level income. It's usually our high net worth clients that have homes in different states and are splitting their time. That being said, it is really not uncommon for someone to have dual residency. Really, when it comes down to these cases, it's almost a case-by-case basis, and they really need to ask themselves a couple questions to figure out what exactly is the best way to go here. Really, the number one question is where do you have your driver's license? Where do you see all of your doctors? What state do you spend the most time in? All of those are really important to determine what state you want to write in. Some people have plans in both states. It's very expensive to do, but it can be done. Some people supplement that with a travel policy or a combination of both. It really is a case-by-case base, but a lot of people are doing split state living now. So it's really important to know that your plan might not cover you in your other state if you don't take some extra steps to ensure that that's the case. So here's a little case study. I did a couple of these throughout so you can kind of see some examples. Unfortunately, when it comes down to digital nomads and insurance, it almost is a literal case-to-case basis. So these are just some examples. Jane Jones works as a freelance digital artist. She has many large clients who sometimes require her to travel outside of her home state. While in Colorado, she slipped on ice and broke her leg. So Jane only had California-based health insurance, so that will only cover up to 50% of her total cost of care. Luckily, this was an emergency, otherwise she wouldn't have any coverage whatsoever. She will have to pay 100% out of pocket for that broken leg, which I broke my leg recently, I can tell you it's very expensive. She'll have to pay 100% out of pocket for her care and then submit a claim for later on down the line. This could have been avoided if she had spoken to a broker or her business manager and got some type of travel policy in place. In many cases, some employers who offer or require their freelance artists or employees to do this type of thing will offer to pay for travel insurance as well. So it's something that you really want to keep in mind. It could be an incredible detrimental financial issue to have this happen to a freelancer. So it's something that you always want to keep in mind. So there are international restrictions as well. This is something that I think should be more common sense than America-based coverage, but you'd be surprised. There are no individual family plans in any state, that's United States total, that will cover care outside of the United States. There are group plans, of course, that will have this type of coverage in some cases, but there are no individual plans. So if you buy your healthcare 100% yourself, you will not have any availability to get international coverage. There are travel policies in place, which we'll be going over a little bit, but some of those require you to keep US-based coverage, so they might not necessarily work. Let's say if you're going internationally for a few months, that can be a little bit expensive. During COVID, a lot of countries required travel insurance to even enter their country. Fortunately, that has gone away. So a lot of the times it won't be required to entry, but you will need it if you are requiring care. Just because a country has universal health care doesn't necessarily mean that as a traveler, you will go there and not have to pay anything at all. So these are probably our more popular options when it comes to travel. Travel insurance it can go leaps and bounds above and below medical insurance. It can kind of include medical and benefits, but also include travel. It really depends on what you're looking for. The two most common that work for insurance purposes, health insurance purposes, are round trip travel policies, which are just to cover you for a set period of time. So if we look back in Jane, that would be a perfect solution for her. It does include travel benefits as well. So if you happen to get stuck or lose your baggage or have, for whatever reason, to be sent back home, you'll have that protection as well. Or if you travel more often, especially those who maybe travel very often for work, annual travel policies are available. There are 364 days, so one less, but they're meant for those that travel very often. Usually they cover for trips up to 45 consecutive days. There are some plans that will cover beyond that for an extra fee, but for the most part, they will cover you for usually about a month trip for a whole entire year. Really good for those who do travel very often. So travel policy benefits can really range, as I mentioned, depending on plan to plan, but these are really the basics. Medical benefits such as room and board, inpatient services. If you have a flu or a cold and you want to just go see a doctor, that stuff will be covered, including dental and vision. So like sudden relief of pain, accident, emergency eye exams. It also includes some larger benefits like emergency evacuation, reparations, medical reunion, bedside visits, return of mortal remains. God forbid something horrible happens and your remains need to be sent back to your country. That can cost a fortune in some cases, so that will cover that. It also includes accidental death and dismemberment, acute onset of pre-existing conditions. It really is a great add-on. It even includes additional benefits, like let's say you are going skydiving in Utah. It'll cover that as well. It is an additional cost, but it will cover for those things as well. That way, if you have a client or if you yourself are just a little bit more on the adventure seeking side of things, you can still know that your coverage will cover you for that as well. Here's just a great example of how cost effective these are. So this is just an example quote for a 7-day trip to Italy with a $5 million medical maximum. I did not include any activities writer. This traveler, she's pretty mellow, but as you can see, it's very inexpensive. That's why a lot of people will opt for this while they're doing any traveling, whether it's for pleasure or for business, because it really is an expensive way to cover your basic bases while you are outside of the country and not, having to file any claims for reimbursement or anything along down the line. So here's another case study here. We got Bob Smith. Bob Smith is a digital assistant for a production company and is required to travel to France for 2 weeks. While in France, Bob contracted COVID. So since he does not have a travel policy, Bob is kind of on the hook for all of that. He will have to pay 100% out of pocket for his care, including any quarantine costs, which also could be depending on the country that he's in and their quarantine requirements. He might be required to stay for an additional 7 to 14 days. So we definitely don't want, we want to try to avoid adding any extra costs to that. This outcome could easily be avoided if he would have just gotten some type of travel coverage for this trip. COVID-19 coverage is built into a lot of travel policies, which is great news for those who are doing lots of traveling and don't want, the stress of a global pandemic to kind of hinder their travel plans or business plans for that matter. So this is something that can be, again, very different depending on a case-by-case basis, but there are some tips to help you maximize. Really, the biggest thing that I can't talk on enough is communication. Spontaneity doesn't serve well in the insurance world. You really need to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you need to be very clear that you don't have a plan. Talking to your financial or business manager and your broker to let them know, hey, I left my job. I'm going to go to India for a month and then I'm coming home and I'm going to Hawaii. Like, keep us in tune with your plans so that we can take your plans or your client's plans and put them into an insurance mindset. Can we make sure that they are covered? We need to be able to provide guidance. And like I said, keeping in contact is really the number one thing that will keep you from having a headache or your clients having a headache later down the road. We understand plans change. We get that. We're humans too. But we have to understand what's going so that we can tell you on a professional manner what the best route is. Also, as I mentioned, travel policies they can be very particular, but they are a great way to add benefits. You just have to be aware. So for example, if you have asthma, like me, I'm so asthmatic, I know that if I needed to buy a travel policy, I would most likely need to get that pre-existing condition waiver. Really, all that is just saying that you are wavering the fact that, or they're essentially accepting the fact that you have a previous or pre-existing condition that may come up while you are traveling. For example, asthma, I'm hiking the Ganges, I get an asthma attack. In some cases, without a pre-existing conditions clause, my inhaler or asthma treatment would not be covered. But if knowing that I have a pre-existing condition and doing all of the clause beforehand will save me drama in the future. Another thing that is kind of changing is that US citizens usually, or previously before COVID, had a fairly hard time buying US to US, basically non-international travel coverage. So now that has definitely changed. US citizens can get travel coverage while traveling within the US, but there are certain criteria to meet. In some cases, that means you have to keep your state-based coverage in order to buy this plan. But that can, again, vary from case to case. As I mentioned, sometimes these travel policies are used as an add-on. That might be because it is required to be used as an add-on and you have to keep your home state coverage, or you just really are going on a quick trip and you just want to add some coverage to that. There are some plans in some cases that a travel policy can be used as almost full coverage, meaning you don't have home state coverage, but those cases are it's kind of hard to come by. A case where that would fit and work perfectly. It does happen. I have clients that are currently doing it, but it's just one of those that it's more often than not viewed as an add-on policy versus taking fully over for your regular medical plan. Here's another quick case study. Cindy is traveling to Costa Rica. She has an individual plan in her home state of California and a round-trip travel policy. She did get a pre-existing waiver for her back problems, and she pulled a muscle in her back, and now she's in a lot of pain. Well, luckily, Cindy did it smart. She got the pre-existing waiver. She made sure she had round-trip covered. So that way, even though this Costa Rica vacation was just it was just a vacation, she's still covering her bases, making sure that she will be covered. So this outcome would be different if she did not get the waiver. She would most likely have to pay for some, if not all, of those treatments as it wasn't originally waived. So that's what I mean by communication is really key. It's definitely something that you or your clients need to be really aware of when you're discussing travel plans with your broker, or even just in general, that you need to know if my back's really been killing me, well, I probably should get that pre-existing waiver then. So this is the part that I wish I was telling you, oh, everything is changing and everything's going to be beautiful. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot specifically going on at the moment, but there's a lot in the pipeline. And that has to do with COVID-19. The pandemic really just changed how the corporate atmosphere is. A lot of people had to adapt to remote work who had never worked remote in their life. And then they realized they like it and they stayed remote workers. So that led to a surge of remote workers throughout worldwide, blurring the distinction between traditional workers and digital nomads. It used to be, like I said, when I was a freelancer, I was one in maybe 100, it felt like. Now we're talking about millions and millions of people. Unfortunately, and this wasn't just for digital nomads or freelancers, but everybody had reduced income opportunities during the pandemic. So that led to a lot of clients and businesses cutting back on spending, which did impact a lot of freelance projects and remote work. That, of course, led to a lot of just a flood of a lot of people not being covered. The markets kind of bounced around. It definitely was a little bit of a shift in perspective when it comes to insurance, and also a shift in preferred destinations. A lot of people moved. A lot of people changed where they wanted to be, knowing now that they didn't have to necessarily be within a driving radius to their offices. And that, of course, made health insurance and travel insurance and all of that a little bit more complicated. You have clients now that were, a rock's throw away from your office, and now they're in a completely different side of the country, which can lead to some insurance problems, obviously, for both group and individuals. But we are hopeful. This is really, I think, the only thing that is keeping me going is knowing that there are changes coming down in the pipeline. Really, the biggest hotly debated change would be to allow individual and family plan members to seek care within the continental United States. I have heard lots of rumblings about this from a couple different carriers that they are exploring this option. Nothing has been officially noted yet. Nothing has actually come down, but it is probably I would say the most likely to happen. Travel policies have already been overhauled, but they are definitely going to continue to be expanded for more of these types of situations. Prior to COVID happening, a US resident could not buy a US travel policy. It was impossible to qualify for. And I think now they are not. So that is definitely changing. And I'm hoping to see a lot more coming within the next year. Really, the whole travel insurance carrier industry as a whole is really recognizing and standing up and saying, we understand that this is a problem and we're going to do something about it. I would not be surprised to see the travel carriers make changes permanently before the states do. Financial assistance is increasing as well. It has increased since COVID and most likely will continue to increase as states expand their financial assistance. That also creates more options on the market. People who were previously unable to, just freelancers specifically, who were unable to afford insurance at all, are now being able to afford it, which will change the marketplace quite a bit. We're hoping for the positive. The more people with these specific type of situations and cases come onto the market, the more that the carriers will see that they need to do some changes. And again, I really cannot tell you how important it is to find the right help. We always like to say, have a friend in the business. I do think that it's really, excuse me, important to like who you work with and be comfortable. If your plans change, you don't want someone to kind of give you a hard time about it. You want them to say, awesome, let me see what I can do to fix this for you. What can I do to make the insurance part of this process as easy as possible? Not to toot our own horn, but I think all of us here at IBC, we really pride ourselves on making sure that we are not only friendly and professional, but really looking out for our clients and looking ahead and seeing what is coming down the pipeline that we can potentially utilize for this case. Okay, so I kind of sped through that pretty fast. To be honest, a lot of this, like I mentioned a million times during this presentation, is case by case. I definitely have seen a lot more of these situations come across my desk in the last couple of years, and I'm expecting to see a lot more as things change. I really just believe that there has to be some type of change coming down the pipeline for the carriers in the next few years, if not in 2024. So do you have anything to add, Heather, or does anybody have any questions?
I guess the thing is that right now, a group is totally different than individual, in that if you have group coverage, you're covered. It depends on the company, of course, but for the most part, you're covered throughout the country. So what we try and do is if you have a possibility, and if you're traveling a lot and or you're moving to a different state or whatever the case may be, we try and put a group situation together if we can to help you with that. But if we can't do that or it's not possible, then it's the individual. And Shiloh said this beautifully. It's communication. We need to know what you're doing so we can get ahead of it, because unfortunately the carriers, and Shiloh again can attest to this, are extremely tight. So the further we know out, the better we can help you. It can't be, oh my God, my client's on a plane today and we need to get coverage for Portugal. It can't happen. So, it's just about, and that's what we pride ourselves on, is making sure that we have a really close relationship with our clients, and them being able to also come back to us and say, this is what we're doing, how should we handle it? That's how it should be. So we just
Exactly.
want to make you aware, and we didn't want anybody to have any unexpected claims, because we do have a lot of people traveling now, have California state or base plans or Texas state plans or whatever the case may be. And we don't want you to have those situations. We want to prepare you before you end up with that. So that's why we're here.
Exactly. And when things are changing, we will definitely be looking into getting another update for you guys.
Mhm.
We are going to be sending another update in regards to the SAG-AFTRA strike that is happening. So I do believe that there's going to be some changes. I really think that we'll see some solid laws coming down. As soon as those are actual, then we will be making another lunch and learn or another little bonus session for everybody so that everyone can be aware of what changes are happening.
And as stuff happens too, we will put lunch and learns on the, on the whatever, on the books. So if things are changing or we find out, we always try and get ahead of it. So just keep an eye out. That's what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And we do have an upcoming, our next lunch and learn is on Medicare, making the most out of Medicare and ensuring that we cover all of those bases. So we'll be seeing you at the next one. And thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. If you did not receive your lunch credit, please let me know. Or you can reach out to Heather or anyone and just let us know that you did not get the lunch credit. We are super happy to send that over. Don't forget, it runs out at midnight tonight, so you have all day to grab it.
And thank you, Shiloh. You did a great job. And thank you everybody for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye, guys.